I think we're ready for Jenny. All right, here we go, guys. Soil Summit 2023. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, good morning. Thanks for having me. Thanks for being here. I'm the first speaker, so I'm going to start it off. A little bit about me. I started in a lab when I was 17 years old. A lot of other people were doing really fun stuff. I was counting mites. And then, to my dismay, I was in charge of washing radioactive dishware. So I decided that that's not something I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I went to school. I got a BS, and then I went and got my master's in food science and technology with an emphasis in microbiology. And then I went to work for Kraft and Gerber over in Europe, Germany and France. And then I came back and I work for the NFL, which a lot of people mistake for football for tomorrow. So they would chase me around at conferences because they thought I was a part of the NFL, but I work for the National Food Laboratory. So I desperately asked to start printing that out. So that's a little bit of background on me. I'm Jenny Garley. I'm the Chief Science Officer for New Age Laboratories. New Age was founded in 1998, and I am just the warm-up act because actually the president of New Age will be speaking, so I'm just giving you an introduction. New Age has been doing SAP for 6 years, and we are farm to field. We do a lot more than SAP analysis, but we do specialize in it. So we can do soil, water, we actually do a ton of food processing. We also do heavy metals. But my role is mainly in SAP analysis. I've been in SAP analysis since 2014. I've worked with 3 different laboratories in 3 different continents. So I feel that I have a pretty unique perspective. So let's get rolling. Okay, that way. Okay, there we go. Okay, so here's the agenda. We're going to go over this, and we have a booth here in the back corner by the fireplace. They're huge SAP analysis reports. I think they're like 6 feet tall. You can't miss us. We'll be there all day and tomorrow, going over questions that you might have. Again, there's so much to go over in SAP analysis. I'm just going to give an overview here. Oh, okay. And I'm going to figure out how to use a clicker. Okay, so let's dive in. What is SAP analysis? It's free nutrients not yet incorporated into the leaf tissue. It's nutrients taken up by xylem and phloem. SAP analysis is nutrient mobility, and we'll be hitting really hard on that today and tomorrow. It is chemical parameters such as pH and EC. It's sugars and bricks, which are different than one another. It's trace elements, and it's total nitrogen. So here's a crosscut of a leaf, and in red I have labeled SAP because it's taken from the xylem and phloem, which is the vascular bundle. So this is a big difference from tissue, because in tissue they would take the whole entire leaf that you see here, the cross section, and ash it. But SAP analysis is just taken mainly from the vascular bundle. Completely different, 2 different tests. So here are the 25 parameters that we currently test for. Like I said, we also do heavy metals as well, and we can do that in a SAP analysis. It's a different report, but we can do that. So this is an actual example of SAP analysis extract, and you can see it's liquid, and the other thing, it's not green. So if you're going to take SAP analysis in the field, we love that you do that. That's fantastic. But I highly recommend sending some samples to the laboratory and kind of making a correlation chart, because that chlorophyll is going to get into your field SAP analysis results and kind of muddle it a little bit. So continue if you're doing in the field, but I would send some off to the lab as well. These are all SAP analysis from different varieties of cannabis. They're really pretty. We're getting some pinks and some purples, and they're pretty. So this is an example of what happens with tissue. So as you can see, there's no liquid involved. You take the whole entire leaf and you ash it, you burn it, and you do the analysis on the ash. So again, two very different analyses. So just some differences in the reporting style as well. So for SAP analysis, it's in parts per million, which is a unit of volume, and tissue is mainly in grams per 100 grams, which is a unit of mass. It also is in percents. For SAP analysis, it's the current uptake of nutrients. For tissue, it's actually the nutrient summary. For SAP analysis, it's nutrient imbalances. And for tissue, it's best for calculating mass uptake or mass nutrient removal. SAP analysis is nutrient movement. And for tissue, it's overall growing conditions. Very different when you're looking at two different tests. So just a few more differences when you're sampling for tissue and you're sampling for SAP is really be mindful for SAP analysis that when you take your samples, you're taking a sample for volume, for liquid. For tissue, you're taking it for ash, so completely different. For SAP analysis, it's perishable and it's time sensitive. Unlike tissue, it is not perishable. You actually put it in paper bags. So for SAP analysis, we express the SAP at differing pressures so that we don't rupture the cells, and it takes about 20 minutes. For tissue, there's weighing, there's grinding, and then you need to ash it, and that takes a minimum of 12 hours. So again, very different. So for SAP analysis, tissue need to stay cool at all times because the nitrogen will volatilize. For tissue, that is, again, not the case. The nitrogen does volatilize. And really, with SAP analysis, I get this all the time. The weight of the sample does not come into play in the analyses. We just ask for a specific weight because we know that we can express the amount of volume we need for SAP analysis, as where tissue, the weight does go into the analysis. Abiotic factors, things we can't control, but I highly recommend to write them down. SAP analysis is sensitive. Consistency is key. So if you have to take samples on a rainy or windy day, please write that down because that can affect the data, pH of the soil, things of that nature. We ask you to always take it in the morning. Everything on this list can affect SAP analysis, but you can't control it, so just write it down. And when you're asking us about your data, let us know about anything on this list. So the key is consistency. Sampling starts with everybody in this room that's going to use SAP analysis, and then people in the lab, we analyze it. So we have the samples are out of our control for actually quite a while. So I'd like a successful sampling campaign this year because I don't want to reject any samples, and I know it takes time and energy and money, so I'd like to run every single one this year. So in order to do that, we need the sample protocols to be read. They're usually just 1 page long, actually, and if anyone has any questions before you start sampling, please let the lab know. We're happy to answer them for you. And chain of custody or sample, all the paperwork that you send in, those really need to be filled out. If you don't fill out that paperwork, that means we don't run your samples. So we get a lot of people not filling out paperwork. And then the other one is shipping. We do have a shipping protocol. The samples are perishable. So again, please ask tons of questions. So here's a general sampling guideline, and I have these printed out also if you need them. So SAP analysis for this talk is actually usually done in pairs, a new yet fully developed leaf and an old yet viable leaf. That's a SAP analysis. We also do root SAP analysis. We also do whole plant SAP analysis. And then for those of you with cereal crops or fruit, we also do a fruit or cereal crop SAP analysis. But today I'll be talking about comparative leaves. So we need the young yet fully developed leaf and the old yet viable leaf in separate bags. For in-ground sampling, it's up until 11 o'clock and 80 degrees. For indoor growing, it's 2 hours after lights on. You can only use Ziploc bags. We get a lot of creativity in this. Really just Ziploc bags only, no paper, no soil sampling bags. And the Ziplocs need to be labeled new and old. We need you to weigh your bags, and you guys with this crop, you all have scales. I know you do. When I talk to corn farmers and stuff like that, they don't always have scales, but I know that you guys have scales, so please weigh your samples. We need a minimum of 80 grams. And we need you to store your samples in a cooler, so pop them in the fridge, in the cooler, until it's ready to ship. And do not wash your leaves or send wet leaves. We need those to be pat dry. We do a lot of trace element testing, and the trace elements are many times less than a part per million. And if you send wet or the leaves that are damp, you can really skew those results. Less than a part per million, that's not very much. And if you add a lot of water, then it goes down to 0. So this is just a plant here, your crop, cannabis. Yeah, thank you. Yes, this is one of Tyler's pictures. We want the new leaf, but I want it to be fully developed. I want to be able to give that leaf a high five. And I want the oldest yet viable leaf, so that's not going to be the lowest leaf on the plant. We don't want your brown, yellow, crunchy leaves because we are looking to extract nutrients, and that is volume of sap. So if you send us something that looks like it's been raked up and you're going to go throw it in the green barrel, we can't extract any sap from that. So it's not the oldest leaf, it's a few up, and it's not the newest leaf, it's a few down. If you give us the brand new leaf on the plant, first of all the nutrients are going to be really low, and it's also not quite photosynthetically active, so you're going to have really low sugar. We can see it right away in the results. So here are some really great sampling techniques here. We have beautiful sampling by the president of the company there. That's beautiful leaves. They still have the petioles on. They're stacked. Some people that just shove leaves into the bag, they actually rip. We want to handle those leaves with care. In the middle, somebody's actually weighing their sample. That's awesome, and they put a little bit extra in. A little bit extra sample is great. And then on the here in that picture, we have full bags. They're labeled. The air is let out, and they're Ziploc bags. That's a home run. Those are great. These are all great samples. Shipping. We all like to talk about it. Joking. These are perishable samples, so we need them in a box with a liner. Using ice packs. I have a rag over the middle picture because we do need a barrier between the samples and the ice packs. Otherwise, the ice packs will do their job every single time. They'll freeze the sample, and we get something sort of like pea soup or frozen thawed gunk at the lab, and I have plenty of pictures of that, and we can't run that. So we do need a barrier. We want the leaves chilly or cold, but not frozen. Shipping 1 to 2 days, no ground, can't do it. I get a lot of questions on that too. So that's how you ship. If you have any questions at all, we are here to answer them. This is a kit I put together quite a few years ago. It's been very popular. Whomever is taking your samples, you always have to leave early in the morning. If you have a kit like this, I just used a plastic toolbox. Whatever's in this picture and you keep it stocked, you will be a great sampler. Otherwise, I get a call around 6:45 in the morning when someone's out in the field and they say, what do I do if I forgot my bags? You don't forget your bags. If you have a toolkit like this, you keep it in your field vehicle or by the front door, you will be very successful in sampling. Okay, we're going to dig into a little bit more of the report and understanding what the report means, because it is new and old leaf together. It's not just numbers. You read nutrients together. They work together. Nutrient mobility and nutrient balance. That's reading a SAP analysis report. So let's talk about Brix, sugar, and photosynthesis. We like this cutout of the leaf. So when you talk about photosynthesis, we talk about sugar. And where does that happen? That happens, they're all green. It happens in the chloroplasts that are filled with chlorophyll. So that's where sugar is created in the leaf, and it's created by photosynthesis. So sugar, on a SAP analysis, you can equate that to photosynthesis. But Brix on the other hand is different. Brix of a SAP analysis is sugar plus nutrients. So we give them both to you. We give you Brix and we give you sugar. So you can kind of compare them, because the Brix isn't the same as Brix. And I say that because there's a lot of nutrients that make up a Brix. You can have a Brix really heavy in chloride and sodium, and you can have a Brix really heavy in calcium and potassium, and you might even have the same Brix number, but the Brix itself is made out of something completely different. And I'll give you an example here. So again, sometimes we think Brix is just a measurement of sugar, when in actuality, it's a measurement of the nutrients in a solution. And if you're measuring Brix of grapes that you're going to harvest, you're right, you're probably measuring in that solution mainly sugar. If you're measuring Brix of a leaf, that's not the case. You're measuring nutrients that are in that leaf. Okay, there we go. All right, so, okay, a little lag time. So we got to thinking, we see a lot of sap, that sometimes the sap, one of the biggest nutrients in sap is chloride. And how does that affect Brix? What component of Brix is chloride? So the lab went to work and they made some known solutions. And this is what we found out. So 1% sugar equals 1 Brix. That's great. You guys can all remember that. That's huge. That's what we want. That's what we're striving for, higher sugar. But if you have a lot of chloride and 1,000 parts per million of chloride on a SAP analysis equals 0.5 Brix. So can you imagine if you have 4,000 parts per million of chloride? That's 2 points of your Brix already, just in chloride. So we did some known solutions. Sorry, this is, 10 nutrients, each at 1,000 parts per million, results in a 0.5 Brix. That would mean if there's no sugar. That's very interesting. So again, your Brix is made up of a slurry, kind of like total nitrogen is made up of a whole bunch of different nitrogen species. Brix is made up of a whole bunch of different nutrients, and it's different for every single sample. So these are some known solutions. This is a list. You can see amino acids actually are very small on the Brix. So I just wanted to point that out, that Brix is complex. It's made up of a lot of moving nutrient parts, and it's not just sugar. So we're going to go into nutrient mobility and why it's important, especially on a SAP analysis. So SAP is mainly used or mainly taken up and extracted from the xylem and phloem. So the xylem you can think of as a railway. When it has a ton of cars and it's moving one direction, it can't split off and go into different parts. It's mass flow coming up from the roots and going up to the shoots. That's xylem. Phloem is a little bit different. Phloem can still take those same nutrients, but they can put them in vehicles. They can go left and right and up and down. So when you think about nutrient mobility, some people say phloem mobility. That's what they're talking about. They're talking about the truck drivers that are able to take the phloem mobile nutrients and move them around up and down. Nitrogen is a great example. Nitrogen is one of the most mobile nutrients in a plant. So NPK, magnesium, sodium, chloride. Sulfur is also mobile, but it has to do with, it's directly correlated with nitrogen mobility as well. So those are your mobile nutrients in a plant. Your immobiles, calcium, boron, manganese. Those are the direct opposites of your mobiles. So why is SAP analysis taken in pairs? So we can read mobility. We can understand how the plant is moving the nutrients around. SAP analysis about nutrient uptake. I like this deficiency chart here. So when you see a physical deficiency, say nitrogen, we all know that lower yellow leaf. The reason why you have that physical symptom is because there's not enough nitrogen in the system, and the plant is really wanting to keep that new part of the plant up and running and going. So it physically removes that nitrogen from the older leaf and moves it up to the newer leaf. And that's what we can actually see in SAP analysis. And we're hoping that that physical symptom never comes into play, because you're able to see incrementally how the plant is moving the nitrogen around. So if you start at 10% deficient and 20% deficient and 30% deficient, it's giving you time to try and rectify that before you see that yellowing leaf. That's what SAP analysis is. So here's just example of our mobile nutrients. Again, the deficiencies are at the bottom. That would be NPK, magnesium. And then our immobiles, you see those deficiencies at the top. That's because the plant, when it runs out of calcium, it cannot pull it out from the older leaf and move it up. In rare occasions it can, but it causes cellular death. So that's why you see your calcium deficiency, those kind of gnarled leaves or sometimes bubbling at the top. That's a calcium deficiency. So that deficiency is at the top and PK is at the bottom. So here's an example of an excess of a mobile nutrient. It's in blue, and this is a cutout of a SAP analysis. So every nutrient, when you're taking a paired leaf SAP analysis, that light green bar is the new leaf, and that dark green bar is the old leaf, and we do comparisons. So I have circled here in blue magnesium, and we now give percents. This is new for this year. So the percent of new versus old, meaning and it's in blue, meaning there's an excess. There's more nutrients than the plant can handle for that mobile nutrient, so it pushes it down to the older leaf and saves it for a rainy day. And when that nutrient gets over 20% excessive, we'll flag it in blue for you if it's mobile. And this nutrient is well over 100% excessive. So that's, if you were adding this nutrient, this is where you can rearrange your dollars and put it into a nutrient that the plant really needs. And here's an example of a SAP analysis on a deficiency. So if anything is, so that means in a mobile nutrient, the new leaf, the light green line, is longer than the old leaf. That means there's not enough of that nutrient in the system, so it has to pull it out of the older leaf to keep this plant going. And we're going to flag those in red. Anything above 20% deficient, we'll put on this for you and we'll flag it in red. So here I have phosphorus circled, and it is well over 60% deficient. So a few problems here. Phosphorus is the battery of your plant, creates ATP. There's tons and tons of processes in the plant that require plant energy, which requires phosphorus. You don't want to go low in that guy. Also, this phosphorus is under 100 parts per million. Really, with any crop, you don't want to go under 100. It's really hard to catch up in a growing season. This is also a great example of an anion imbalance, meaning you have way more of one anion than you do another, and it causes an imbalance. And we'll go over that. So when you see a SAP analysis and you've got some nutrients in red, you can start seeing how deficient you are. So we're going to move on to the nitrogen cycle. Sorry if I'm going a little fast, but again, this is just an overview. So we have nitrogen parameters on a SAP analysis. They're at the bottom of the report. And I'm just going to teach you what those numbers mean in case you wanted to dig into it a little bit more for yourself. We can measure nitrate and we can measure ammonium. What we want from our nitrogen is amino acids and proteins, which we don't measure. So we do a little back math, meaning we can subtract out what we can measure and we solve for X, which is amino acids and proteins. You want what's in that yellow circle. You want your nitrogen to go into amino acids and proteins. You don't want it sitting in nitrate and ammonium. So here's a cutout of nitrogen parameters. It's at the lower part of a SAP analysis. Everything here is measured except the nitrogen efficiency conversion percent. Woo, big name, so we're going to call it a nice number. So I'm going to teach you the math behind that because it is a conversion. Right here. So you can get this SAP analysis and think, oh, 12% deficient, no big deal, set it aside. You are right. The plants are only 12%, no big deal. You probably want to watch it till next time. But if you don't look at your nice number, this is where, right here, this is what SAP is showing you. Hey, really big problem. A nice number being a percentage, you really want 100%, 80%, 90%. That means your plants are utilizing the nitrogen that you're giving them. When you drop below 80%, that means your plant efficiency in nitrogen use is going down, meaning what you're feeding the plants, they're not able to break down. That blue arrow for new leaf at 40%, that means the nitrogen that it's being fed, the plants are only breaking down 40% of it. And they're leaving 60% on the table. That's problematic. So before you go and add a whole bunch of nitrogen, it's really important to figure out why your plants aren't breaking it down, why they can't utilize it. So we're going to go over a little bit of math. I'm happy to go through this anytime today or tomorrow. We do all the math for you. But if you want to know what's behind the numbers, I'll explain it to you really fast right now. So when you're doing a comparison for nitrogen, it's new leaf to new leaf and old leaf to old leaf. Don't cross the streams, won't work out. So we give you the nitrogen in ammonium and the nitrogen in nitrate, meaning we strip out the hydrogen in ammonium and we strip out the oxygen in nitrate so you can compare to total N. You need to compare apples to apples. That's why we do that for you. So when you get a CSAP analysis and you have a low nitrogen conversion efficiency number and you want to know, is it nitrate that's causing that? Is it ammonia that's causing that? Where's my plant not being able to break down my nitrogen? Well, let's do the math. Oops. So we're going to look at ammonium first. We have the blue arrow at 140. Total nitrogen at 1700. We're going to divide the two. 140 by 1700 gives you 0.08, not a big deal. We're going to make it into a percent by timesing it by 100. So that means 8% of your total nitrogen is unbroken down ammonium. Not a big deal. That's not a very high number. Now let's go look at your nitrate. We got a little different story here. 880 unbroken down nitrate, measurable nitrate. That means not going into amino acids and proteins. 880 divided by your same total nitrogen, 1700, 0.52, make it into a percent, 52. 52% of your total nitrogen is unbroken down nitrate. That's a problem. So we're going to add that 8% from ammonium and that 52% from nitrate so you can see how your nitrogen is broken down right there. So that's 60% of your total N is unbroken down, unutilized nitrogen species, and 40% is amino acids and proteins, which is how you get your nice number of 40%. So this is the report it came from. So let's look at some nutrients that help break down your nitrogen. Sulfur, macronutrient needed to break down nitrogen. Well below 100, biggest problem, lowest hanging fruit. Iron, moly, zinc, all low as well, all needed to break down nitrogen. So before you add a whole bunch of nitrogen, these are the problems that you may want to think about addressing to help your plants break down the nitrogen that you're providing or switch your form. Why isn't breaking down nitrogen even important? Why do we even care? Why can't it just sit in nitrate and ammonium? Everything on this list requires broken down nitrogen. These things are pretty important. So these are the nutrients, the main nutrients required for nitrogen reduction. There are others for sure, but these are the main ones. Your macronutrients, magnesium and sulfur. If those are low, just stop right there. Just don't go any further, fix that. Then we have some trace elements coming into play. Copper, moly, zinc, manganese, and iron. And then I have our battery at the bottom because breaking down nitrogen requires energy. If your plant doesn't have enough ATP, you're not going to break down your nitrogen. And then I have water. Tyler mentioned that water is the biggest nutrient you give your plant. Many processes require water. So if you don't give your plant water, your processes aren't working. So I did put that one on there as well. So let's move into cation and anion imbalance. Super fun. I think you've all seen Liebig's law of the minimums, the barrel, at some time in your life, which is great. SAP analysis takes that premise and builds upon it by Arthur Wallace, the law of the maximums. And the reason why these two laws work really well together is that Liebig was correct. You do need to look at your lowest hanging fruit on a SAP analysis, your lowest deficiency, and plug it. Because if you don't plug that lowest hole in the barrel full of water, you're going to continue to leak. You're going to continue to have lower yields or lower quality. But looking a little bit deeper, why do you have that deficiency? It's usually because you have another yin and yang effect, meaning you have an excess somewhere. And that's a cation and anion imbalance. Usually if you have a high, you have a low. Arthur Wallace and Liebig. Okay. So let's talk about cation imbalances first, positively charged elements. If any of you guys play golf, have seen golf balls, put any kind of balls into a container, you can fill that container and then you can try to add more balls to that, and you can try as you might, but they will continue to fall out of the basket. It's the same with cations. The plant only takes up so many cations, so what do you want to fill that basket with? Remember that sodium is a cation, and it's one of the easiest nutrients to be taken up in a plant. We definitely don't want to fill our golf basket full of sodium. So here's a cation imbalance here. We have a blue line and we have a red highlighted area. Potassium, many times we see that as our excess. It's about 34% excessive, and usually with a high you have a low. Magnesium just beginning to go low at 23%, but mag is so important. You do not want to go low on mag. If you are trying to create any kind of sugars, one magnesium for nitrogen equals chlorophyll, so you don't want to go low on that one. So let's talk about anion imbalance. Same thing, golf balls. Don't try to fill your golf basket full of chloride. Cannabis can handle chloride. That's not the problem here. The problem is, what does it block out? I think that says an excess of like 300% or something. That is kind of normal, what we see. Cannabis is really good at taking up chloride and handling a lot of it. And it's usually in your water, so it's normally not your fault. If you do have a report that looks like this, I would try to figure out where the chloride is coming from. And again, with every high, there is a low. Phosphorus is normally the one that loses every single time. So we do have a deficiency here. It's highlighted in red. It's also under 100. Going to be pretty hard to come back from an anion deficiency or imbalance at this point. So hopefully you're taking SAP analysis early on and you start to see a slight imbalance and correct it before it gets to this point, because you can shove a whole bunch of phosphorus in there, but the golf basket is full already. So let's talk about some nutrient relationships, protagonist, antagonist. We're going to fit in some trace elements. I know I haven't talked about those. I only have a little bit of time, but super important. So aluminum on a SAP analysis, it will never have a graph because it should be 0. It's toxic to roots. Boron, very important. Reproductive nutrient, also enhances calcium uptake. Cobalt, I know we don't talk about that one. Really very important in legumes, but it's also involved in photosynthetic pigments. Copper, skin elasticity, also mold. Yes, Tyler talked about that, and photosynthesis. Oh, nitrogen or iron, so important. Like 70% of it goes into making your chloroplast, which is photosynthesis. Got to have that guy. Manganese, king of trace elements, so important. I can't even tell you, involved in tons of pathways, activating enzymes. The other one is it makes potassium way more efficient, just to let you know. Involved in photosynthesis. Molybdenum, very important nitrogen reductase, especially in nitrate. Oh, if you have any fires in the area, that means you have sulfite in the air. Molly can help with that. And it has a synergism with boron, which we'll go over in a minute. Nickel activates the urease enzyme. Selenium, there won't be a line on it. Not very many people in the United States are doing selenium, putting it on, but when you see selenium on a sapanalysis report, it's natural uptake. Silica, yes, you are the crop that adds monosilicic acid, which is the main form that plants take of silica in. If you are using that product and you want to know if it's working, sap analysis is for you. It's one of the only tests that can actually test for silica. It's linked with loose indicator of soil biology, which is awesome. So if you guys are going from dead soil to living soil, this is one for you as well. And zinc, oh my goodness. It does so much in the plant, and so many people are deficient in it. Very, very big in reproduction, and it also helps phosphorus uptake in the plant. So this is a visual that we created, and it's a nutrient wheel. It's in 4 quadrants. The lower quadrant here are macrocations. They are all competing to get into the plant. And as I've talked with sodium before, hopefully you're getting in your potassium, your calcium, your magnesium, and suppressing sodium. That's really the imbalance that we want there. And then we have the anion imbalance. And we really want to try to suppress that chloride. You can have a lot of chloride, but you want to get those other anions as well. Then you have the top half. These are trace elements. They do compete with one another. We don't see a lot of competition unless you have an over-application, because a lot of sap analysis come back with less than a part per million of all of these. Most of the time, trace elements are low across the board. I just put that together really fast. There are a lot of other relationships in a plant. These are some big ones that we see. In the red, that's the molybdenum, boron, calcium synergism stack. And most of the time, people are missing molybdenum and boron, so that relationship is null and void unless you have all the players. So I did color code some relationships that we see quite readily. And this is a sap analysis. We've come to the end. We have a brand new color coding. We have the red that we went over. We have the blue that we went over. So for the red, let's see. Oh, the blue is up first. So for the blue, anything that has over 20% in that older leaf is an excess, and we highlight it there for you, and we give you the percent of an excess of new versus old. Then the red, deficient, meaning there's more nutrient in the newer leaf, and so we highlight that in red for you, above 20% for that deficiency. And then one we haven't gone over here is yellow. Yellow is like, whoa, caution warning, really low uptake. Stop looking at mobility. This nutrient is just very, very low, and it shouldn't be this low. So take a step back and try to figure out why this nutrient just isn't getting in. And then we also have some percents on here that they're not color-coded at all. They're just white. And those are just like, hey, you're 8% deficient, kind of no big deal. You might just want to keep a little eye on that for next time, things of that nature. What we haven't talked about yet is calcium. Tyler, how am I doing on time?
We got 10 minutes.
Okay, thanks. So calcium, and how do you read it? And it's a macronutrient, and it's immobile, and it's not falling in any of the categories that we talked about so far. So calcium is taken up by the roots. It fills the old leaves first, and then if there's enough, it'll fill the new leaves, which is why you see calcium deficiency in the new leaves, and that's why you see nitrogen deficiency, which is a mobile nutrient, in the bottom. So you want your calcium numbers to be as close as you can together, meaning you're getting really good uptake of calcium. Here, the numbers are pretty far apart. I think it's like 790 and 1430. It's about a 50% deficiency, meaning the old leaves are being filled first, and that's always the case usually, and there's not enough calcium in the one-way elevator to reach the new leaves. So that's what we're seeing there. For our trace elements, there. So they're semi-mobile to unmobile. Boron, manganese aren't mobile. You really just want to look at the parts per million, and many times you just want it there. So anything under a part per million for zinc, for iron, for boron, manganese, that's just incredibly low. We do have optimum levels, and we really want to surpass that lower optimum level, and unfortunately a lot of people don't even make that optimum level. So it's not really about mobility on trace elements, it's about getting it into the plant. And as you know, that iron and manganese are redox nutrients, so that's where your abiotic factor comes in of pH, things of that nature. So if you're using iron and manganese and it's just not getting into the plant, you're not seeing it in sap analysis, check pH and things of that nature. Is it becoming unavailable in your spray tank? Things like that. So you can, it's not really about mobility, is it showing up? That's the OLs, that's optimum level. But we do use mobility to override that, because the plants are going to show you how they're going to move that nitrogen around. No matter what anyone says the optimum level is, they will move around those mobile nutrients to their optimum level of that growth stage. So that's kind of sap analysis in a burrito form. Do we have any questions? Yes. Do optimum levels change with plant growth stage? Absolutely. Vegetative versus flower? Absolutely. Calcium versus potassium? Yes. Yeah, good job. Yeah. Yes, sorry, I'm the first speaker.
Anybody asking questions? I can hand you the microphone here so we can hear it very well. Jenny, just tell me who to hand the microphone to.
You know what? I'm gonna follow you with your microphone.
Okay. So you had a question?
Can you tell what each variety takes out of the soil? Basically, like if you're running a clone, and you get it to ideal results, is that going to tell you what it took out and what that particular flavor needs more of? And are you comparing with THC and terpene content to the final result, and then looking at terpenes and THC versus your optimal thing so you can say where to steer it?
Wow. That was a big question. So Scott will handle some of that in our next presentation. I'm just how to read a sap analysis report. We have looked at THC levels, but that's really, we don't get a lot of that because we don't test for that in the laboratory. We're just leaves. But also when you mention taking out of the soil, that would be more like mass balancing with tissue. Sap analysis is how the plant is taking up the nutrient. It's nutrient uptake versus taking how much is being taken out of the soil. There's a little bit of a difference there. This is what the nutrients are taking up at the time of sampling and how they're interacting with one another. There's, that's why I went over cation imbalances, anion imbalances, and especially looking at your nitrogen parameters. Are your plants breaking down your nitrogen? So at the end, when you take maybe 5 sap analysis for a season and you have positive results for that variety, I would say make some nutrient uptake graphs, which we can help you with, and that's the nutrient uptake graph of, say, nitrogen or calcium that you're really looking for to create that end result. Okay? And you do see a ton of difference in nutrient uptake by variety. I know Scott will hit on this. Do try to take different samples for different varieties because, as you guys know, they feed different.
Same strains in the same bed is what I've kind of been preaching because, then your sap testing can be done on these beds and you can look at that data over time and you can start quantifying how that can benefit you and see if you could not have to do a test every single time because then you're seeing repetition. So, anybody else have any questions here? I can run the microphone over to you.
Thank you. My question is boron, and can I use borax and the calcium boron and was it moly?
Moly.
That zinc relationship, and then also fires and ash. So if you could go over that again real quick, it was really.
Oh, okay.
What you
Yeah.
said.
So moly, boron, calcium synergism. So the moly helps the boron helps the calcium in that synergism stack. But unfortunately, very few people have molybdenum, and a lot of people are low on boron. So you need all 3 for that synergism. And molybdenum also helps with the sulfite, which is what happens with fires in the air, and it's actually toxic to plants, and they do need help breaking that down. Moly is involved in that.
Great. Question over here, Tat.
Oh, zinc's phosphorus. Sorry about that.
It's on? Okay. So where are you getting the targets? How are you correlating those to cannabis or specific varieties?
OLs, optimum levels, optimum nutrient levels.
And then how do you use those numbers to create actionable data for a grower to make changes in their processes, I guess?
Yeah. So we belong to a database with multiple SAP laboratories all over the world that put into the database. But that's why I was saying varieties, we're trying to pull out that data because the OLs are not variety specific, but we have a huge cannabis database, and we actually are obtaining some OLs for some larger amounts of samples that have been put in for a specific variety. Not so much for other crops, but cannabis has so many varieties, so we are able, that's why filling out that paperwork is so important. So we do have an overall international database, but mobility is so much more key because the plants are literally telling you, hey, I don't have enough nitrogen. I don't care that the OL says 1,500 parts per million. I'm low at this vegetative growth stage. I need more today. That's the power of mobility because it's strain specific. So, So plants out in the wild, in the forest that we don't fertilize, they move around nutrients all the time. That's how we're here as humans, because they create oxygen. Plants continue to move around nutrients all the time. So when we're comparing, when the plant is continually taking out nitrogen from the older leaf and moving it to the new leaf, they're going low, and then you will see a sign and symptom of yellow. That's
that mobility, that's how plants survive, is they're trying to move around their nutrients to keep their newer parts alive. That's how plants work in the wild, that we're not pushing for yields. So that's why reading mobility is so important. And we do have those optimums, like I said, from an international database, but knowing that you have less than a part per million of iron in veg, you're iron deficient, and many times you can see the signs and symptoms. That's why we do have a range of iron, but we really suggest that you go to the higher level of iron, because iron is so important. We know what it does in plants. Am I helping you answer that question? Okay, Scott will go a little bit more into it. I'm just the first act.